Bill is off this week, and Andrew and I are filling in, and there's a lot of stuff going on. I mentioned earlier this week that we were going to talk about the Green New Deal, and we had hoped to get Howie Hawkins on the radio, and sure enough, he is able to join us. He's on the line right now with us. Good morning, Howie. How are you?
I'm great, thanks. It is a good morning, except for that weather out there.
Well, yeah,
That's true.
It's really nasty. Did Syracuse get buried, too?
Yeah, I can see my car out there. It looks like it's covered with ice and snow, and
Yeah,
it's a mess.
It's nasty. I was complaining about this last hour. My jeans are soaking wet because I had to snow blow the driveway before I left this morning in a rush to get here. But anyway, I want to talk to you about the Green New Deal. There's been a lot of criticism of this because of the way it's rolled out and because how it gets into other things like health care and equality and all these other things when it's really primarily supposed to be an environmental issue. Your take on the Green New Deal, do you support it?
Yeah, I've been campaigning for it since 2010. I was the first person to run for office saying we need a Green New Deal. That was the 2010 gubernatorial campaign. And the Green Party's been pushing this thing, and now it's suddenly exploded. Everybody's talking about it. And the federal or congressional resolution that Senator Ed Markey and Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez put in captures what we were talking about. We were always talking about the Green New Deal because we wanted to complete the original New Deal. As Franklin Roosevelt, in his last State of the Union, said we need an economic Bill of Rights. He wanted Congress to enact it. And what the green part of it does, the energy transition, is it gives us the economic stimulus and the sustainable economic foundation to realize those rights. And politically, you've got to link economic security to climate safety, or a lot of people are going to be worried, well, okay, you're going to close down the power plant or the nuclear plant, and what's going to happen to my community or my job? So we've got to have what we call a just transition, so people's income and benefits are maintained until they get into the green technology. So I think the concept is being embodied in that, and we have a Green New Deal for New York that was announced Monday. I was at the press conference, Senator Sanders and Representative Ortiz. So, what we're talking about is now in play. The problem is, Governor Cuomo is branding what he's talking about as the Green New Deal, and it's not what we were talking about. And there's climate legislation that is not as strong as it needs to be. There was a hearing yesterday, and there are two more this week, on a bill that would try to get us to clean energy, 100% clean energy, and zero carbon by 2050. But the science says we got to get there by 2030. So, we're glad it's in discussion now, but we got to keep pushing for what the science says we need to do.
So you are on board with the. There was one phrase in there where it said basically everyone would be afforded a basic income. Everybody gets this economic security, whether or not they want to work. You're all on board with that.
I think the thing about it's people that cannot or should not work. Should not might be a young mother with children or a young parent with children. The idea of a job guarantee is that everybody willing and able to work, if they can't get a job in the private sector, there's public works or public services for them to do. And for those that cannot or should not work, there's the income that keeps them above poverty. That's been a concept.
Absolutely, but the Green New Deal kind of goes well beyond that. I felt like, and that's why I'm kind of surprised that you're supporting it, because it is. I mean, it literally says in there, the one sheeter that was handed out said, if you're unwilling to work, they'll just basically give you a salary. Not if
I think that was a quote from what Ocasio-Cortez said in the news conference, and it was, I think she misspoke. Anyway, that's not what we're talking about. We're not just, handing out money for people that, aren't going to do anything.
And the part about getting rid of airplanes, air travel in a decade, do you think that's possible and you support that?
That's not in the resolution. People say that's the hardest part of carbon emissions. You might look at biofuels, which would be carbon neutral, hydrogen. I think what we'll probably have to do as a practical matter is increase a lot of the intercity travel through high-speed rail, which is actually faster than going out to the airport, going through all that, waiting for your plane, et cetera. The trains could be quicker, actually, for like a New York to Washington trip or a Syracuse or Utica to New York trip. So air travel, I don't think we're getting rid of air travel. We got to make it less of an impact on the climate by all the carbon it emits.
Okay, and I know you're talking a bit about the New York, the New Deal in New York, and then I'm asking you, I think, some questions on what AOC and
what the
and
Green
Markey
Party
rolled out.
What the Green Party website has, and one thing I want to ask you about is the cost of this. So in 2019, in fiscal year 2019, the federal budget will be about $4.4 trillion. This Green New Deal is estimated to cost $700 billion to $1 trillion annually. How is this going to get paid for?
Well, that price, and I haven't examined how they got that number, but that price is about what we spend on the military. And the Pentagon and the intelligence community will tell you that the biggest long-term threat we face is climate change and what comes from that, because we're not just talking about more intense storms and longer heat waves. We're talking about mass extinctions, ecosystem collapse, agricultural collapse and food shortages, mass impoverishment, mass environmental migration, social conflicts, and wars over what's left. So this is a very serious situation to all of our security. And so we've got to address it. And we like to use the analogy of what we did in World War II. I mean, the War Production Board took over a quarter of the manufacturing in the country to turn an industry on a dime to build the arsenal for democracy to defeat the Nazis. And that's the scale of what we're facing, because this is the biggest security threat we face. So,
well, I think
you don't put a price tag on something if it's your basic security. You figure out how to do it. Now,
but the battle is, Howie, I think, and I don't mean to cut you off, but I think the real problem is that, you say that this is the biggest security threat, but also there are security threats around the country or around the world that we're still going to have to deal with. It's not like if we're battling an energy crisis that Russia and China and some of our other actual enemies are going to stop.
Right.
The U.S. military is just all of a sudden going to not be needed.
I'm not saying eliminate the military. I'm just saying we've got to spend what we need to provide for our security. And so that's what we've got to do. Now, I can give you some numbers for New York State.
Sure.
There was a study done by Mark Jacobson, and he's an engineer at Stanford with some economists and engineers at Cornell and Binghamton University and so forth back in 2013. And they said to get to 100% clean energy by 2030 would be a $460 billion capital investment. Now, there's a carbon tax proposal that would give a rebate to the bottom half or two-thirds of the income spectrum so they wouldn't be hit so hard, but it would generate $7.1 billion. Now, if you put $4.6 billion of that as an investment every year over 10 years, you got $46 billion, and then that would leverage private investment. The Obama stimulus spent $14 billion on clean energy, and it generated 47 times more private investment. Using a conservative 10-to-1 leverage, you get your $46 billion a year or $460 billion over 10 years. So a carbon tax could provide the financing at the scale of New York, and I think you'd find the same thing if you crunch the numbers for the national level.
I don't know. There's some really eye-opening things in here. And how many times, Howie? I know you've run for office. You mentioned when you first ran in, or when you ran in 2010, you were pushing a Green New Deal and that you had introduced this. It seems like every 10, 12 years we get this new warning that says if we don't do something in the next 10 to 15 years, the world's going to end really quick. And every 10 to 15 years we get there and
the clock gets reset. There's
a reset on the clock. Do you think federally this is going to be? I mean, even Nancy Pelosi kind of laughed at this bill. I shouldn't say bill. I know it's non-binding. It's more of a hey, we should do more for the environment thing.
Plan, really.
But it's just so far-reaching. They talk about health care for all in here. There's no chance that this gets passed.
Yeah, and do you think that to piggyback on Jeff's point about the health care for all that's included in it? Is there too much in it that's not related to the green part of this? Well,
and I think, Howie, correct me if I'm wrong, you kind of explained that earlier because you indicated that in order to do something like this, you would have to give up industry to some level. So those people who would be displaced by not having a job would be entitled to health care and basically a salary. Go ahead. Sorry.
Okay, well, there are a number of things here. First of all, Pelosi's response to the Green New Deal says that's why we need a Green Party, because the Democrats are not going to get it done. Single payer would cost 98% of us less than we now pay in both our taxes for the public programs and our premiums, co-pays, deductibles, whether we pay them directly or we pay it, or our employer pays it for us, under our job. So that's a money saver for people. As far as closing industries, we're actually going to open up more industries. The Jacobson study I referred to said building the system out would create 4.6 million jobs in manufacturing and construction and related administration and services over that period. That's an enormous economic boom, and it would cut electric rates in half. And it would create so many business opportunities. I mean, we've got to retrofit all the buildings for efficiency. That's a lot of windows. That's a lot of insulation. We got to convert from gas heating and cooling to electric-powered heat pumps, which operate like refrigerators. They cool you in the summer and they warm you up in the winter. You just reverse the switch. So there is a lot of opportunity for business there. So, and then as far as linking the economic security programs to the climate programs, my argument is you're not going to get any of them passed unless they're linked. Look at the referendum to limit fracking in Colorado. Got defeated because people were worried it would impact them. There was no economic security piece to that. Same with the carbon tax referendum in Washington State. These were both last November. That's why we've got to link the issues so people feel assured of their economic security as we make this energy transition.
All right. Howie Hawkins, Green Party candidate for governor of New York a few times. Are you running next time as well? Do you plan to?
I plan to be retired, read a couple hundred books, maybe write a book or two.
Uh-huh.
And now Greens around the country are asking me to run for president on this, Green New Deal and some other issues. And, if they want me, I guess it's my responsibility to do it. I helped start the party back in the 80s. So I'm looking for another candidate.
Yeah.
But, they're moving faster than me. So they're putting the pieces together. So that may be what I'm doing.
Wow.
Whether I'm doing that or just being an advocate and writing about it and speaking out about it, I'm going to stay active on the issues.
Well, Howie, I have one more question for you. It was actually something that your Green Party colleague Mark Dunley was in studio talking to us about when he was running for comptroller. One of the things he wanted to see get done is the pension fund to not include fossil fuels or money from fossil fuels. Is that something that you see as more of a possibility now that the Democrats control both the Senate and the Assembly in New York?
It's not on their radar. They're not talking about it. I know Mark's still pushing. I was down there with him at this news conference for a Green New Deal for New York. We saw Scott Stringer, who is the comptroller of New York City. They did divest, and Mark was bugging them, and now they seem to have a better relationship now that they divested. They built the political coalition to do it. New York State, Governor Cuomo said he's for it, but I don't see the energy or the movement or the advocacy by the elected legislators. So that's another thing that we got to keep pushing on.
All right, Howie Hawkins, thank you so much.
And Howie, as we let you go, I'll be honest, I kind of thought you were going to bring some, you were going to reject parts of this and kind of say, this is kind of pie in the sky. This isn't reality, because that's how I feel about it. But you're all in on this, man. And if you're running for president, I wish you the best of luck. But
okay.
This is.
He's an optimist.
When I hear pie in the sky, that says it's hard. It doesn't mean it's not right. And just because it's hard doesn't mean we shouldn't try.
All right, Howie Hawkins may be running for, might be joining the growing list of candidates who are running for president of the United States. So, wish you the best of luck. Take care, Howie.
All right, thank you.
I wonder if Howie had a band in high school like Jill Stein did. Wasn't that the big thing when she was running for president in 2016? Was that she had a band or something? And then we had played a few clips from Jill Stein's.
I'll be honest.
High school days.
Maybe I'm being completely naive here. I thought Howie was going to come on and go, well, there was a little overreaching, and
I didn't really expect that from him.
They're a little ambitious. There's a little too much ambition in there.
Well,
this is ridiculous.
Well, one of the big things too at the State of the Union, and again, some would argue, well, you got to take it with a grain of salt because Trump said it. We're now a huge exporter of natural gas and other types of energy to other countries. So would that income stream for the United States, would all those exports end? I mean, how would they make up any funds from that? I mean, it seems like a lot. I mean, they're totally replacing every fossil fuel with they're talking about offshore windmills and all this other stuff. I don't see how you can get the same amount of reliable energy as you can with natural gas and oil. I just don't see it.
The other part of this is, and I'm not reading from a conservative or right-leaning outlet here. This is from NPR.org. Some of the highlights of this bill, and Howie disagreed with me on one of the not on one of the points I made, but one of the things where they said if people were unwilling to work, they would still get a salary. I'm not making that up. That was actually part of the package. Well,
because part of the problem is, and he even said it himself, is that nobody's on the same page when it comes to what the real Green New Deal is. I mean, he said,
then why
AOC,
are they rolling it out and asking people to sign it and vote on it?
Because 2020 is coming up, man.
It doesn't make any sense. Okay, so this is from NPR. Again, it would include upgrading all existing buildings. All existing buildings, okay? Not just homes and or businesses or the other. Upgrading all existing buildings in the country.
Even the price tag, $700 billion to $1 trillion a year. That's almost a quarter of our budget,
and that's for
the country.
Working with farmers to eliminate pollution and greenhouse gas emissions as much as technologically feasible. That's in quotes. Overhauling the transportation system. And here was the point again on the airplanes, where when I ask the question, it seems like those who support this go, well, what we're really trying to do is because that jet fuel is bad, so we want to use less of it. Okay, and that's kind of what Howie said. Overhauling transportation system. Again, this is a quote from NPR. This is not me saying this. To reduce emissions, including expanding electric car manufacturing so that there are, quote, they build charging stations everywhere, end quote.
Again, there's so many things you don't consider, okay? And we talked with Ed Welsh about it. What happens when it's, negative 20 and your electric car doesn't start? Because the battery's frozen.
Yeah, and you get much smaller range on it. And expanding high-speed rail to, quote, a scale where air travel stops becoming necessary. This is outrageous. A guaranteed job. Here we go. A guaranteed job with a family-sustaining wage, adequate family and medical leave, paid vacations, and retirement security for every American. And then also high-quality health care for all Americans. Again, when I asked Howie this just a few minutes ago, he's like, well, that would be maybe people who are displaced by,
by the fact that, all the factories have, been closed down. And
and
all the natural gas drilling sites and all the, everything.
All the jobs tied to the fossil fuel
people
industry.
Have to close because, I've got to convert my building to 100% renewable energy.
He kind of seemed to say that those who would be displaced by losing their job because they have some tie to the fossil fuel industry in some way, that, we can't just throw them out. And I get that, but this says a guaranteed job with a, quote, family-sustaining wage. I don't even know what that means. For every American, not those who are displaced by the changes, the radical changes that we want to make. So there it is, and that's the summary from NPR. I'm not making that up.
Yeah, well,
that's not Sean Hannity's summary of this bill. So
a lot of it too is infrastructure based, and I think that right now we've got to replace existing failing infrastructure before we start thinking about building new railroad systems and high-speed rails and things like that. Let's worry about pipes and sewers and things like that before we start worrying about building all new high-speed rail systems. I mean, can you imagine the cost of that alone? Just building the infrastructure for a high-speed rail system?
Well, fortunately, I actually don't think this is going to go anywhere. There aren't even enough Democrats on the national level who currently would support this. And I think as more of this gets to, as more people get eyes on this and what they want to do, I actually think fewer and fewer people will come out and publicly support it.